Jackson sat back in his chair, swiping through another tedious spreadsheet on his laptop. His life, at this moment, was pretty much the same as it had been for the past 6 months: boring, slightly frustrating, and entirely uneventful. He was a man of routine, who liked it that way. His duplex was cozy enough, and the fact that it was a little worn down made it feel more homey. He wasn't exactly living the dream, but what else did he expect? Adulting was a mess. The bills were stacked, the dishes piled up, and the idea of socializing outside his apartment felt like too much work. But one thing he didn't expect was the new neighbor. Or, more specifically, her. Duplex. The name sounded like a bad sci-fi character from an old movie, but there she was, his new neighbor. Jackson first saw her one evening when he went to take the trash out. At first, he thought it was some kind of performance artist, because she certainly looked the part. Tall, angular limbs, iridescent skin that shimmered under the hallway light, and eyes, huge eyes. He froze. Was she wearing a costume? No, that wasn't a costume. There was no way. She was, quite literally, an alien. She turned her head slowly as he passed by, a warm, almost eerie smile playing on her face. "Greetings, neighbor," she said in an odd accent that didn't quite match anything Jackson had ever heard. Jackson, ever the socially awkward introvert, felt a pit form in his stomach. Hey," he muttered, throwing the trash in the bin, too afraid to make eye contact for more than a second. "Your species, interesting," she said. "I would like to offer you a gift." Before Jackson could even respond, she handed him a small, glowing rock. It was smooth, almost like glass, but with an iridescent sheen that pulsed with soft light. Jackson stared at it, blinking rapidly. Thanks? Is it customary for your species to exchange gifts in a formal way?" she asked, tilting her head as though trying to solve a riddle. Yeah, sometimes," Jackson said, backing away a bit. "Not really formal, though. Usually it's more like pizza or something. You know, casual." Duplex didn't respond, but instead just stared at him, as if processing his words, her eyes wide and unblinking. It was too much for Jackson. He managed a weak smile and stepped backward into his apartment, slamming the door behind him. As he leaned against it, the weight of the awkward encounter slowly crept up on him. Who was this alien, and what the hell had just happened? The next few days passed with a familiar kind of monotony, but there was a shift in the air. Jackson couldn't stop thinking about Duplex. She knocked on his door again the next morning, bearing more gifts. This time, it was a small jar filled with what looked like glowing, squishy things. Jackson couldn't even tell what they were. When she handed it to him, he instinctively took it, despite knowing that he was in way over his head. "Thanks again," he said, trying not to sound like a complete idiot. "I don't know what this is, but appreciate it." She tilted her head in confusion, her voice calm but deliberate. "It is customary for my people to share food during this time." "Food?" Jackson repeated, glancing down at the jar of glowing squishiness. "Yeah, I think I'll pass on eating whatever this is. Sorry, it's just not my thing." Duplex didn't seem to take offense. Instead, she simply stared at him, blinking slowly. "Your refusal, intriguing. It is known that humans find certain substances incompatible with their biology. We must adapt." "Well, I'm not that picky, but yeah, you could say that," Jackson mumbled, trying to salvage the conversation. "Maybe we just do pizza, huh? You know pizza? It's pretty universal." "Pizza," she repeated, as if testing the word on her tongue. "Interesting. I shall investigate this pizza." Things got weirder from there. Duplex began showing up at odd hours, sometimes knocking, sometimes just standing outside his door, staring at him through the peephole. She'd leave little alien trinkets on his doormat. Her presence started becoming a thing. It wasn't just the odd gifts. It was everything. The way she'd linger, just watching him with those big, alien eyes as if trying to figure out some grand cosmic puzzle. Then it started. The subtle shifts that signaled something was happening. Jackson woke up one morning to a strange sound coming from outside his door. He opened it cautiously, only to find the hallway completely marked. Glowing symbols, alien graffiti, covered the walls, and there were strange pheromone-like scents in the air that immediately made him nauseous. The scent was oddly familiar, like a mixture of wet dog and something too sweet to be real. Duplex appeared from nowhere, standing in the middle of the hallway with her arms raised in what could only be described as a dramatic pose. Her voice was low and resonant as she said, "I have marked this space for our bonding. We are now connected." "Excuse me?" Jackson asked, rubbing his eyes. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. "What the hell do you mean, bonding? I think there's been some mistake. I don't even know you. And I don't want to be bonded." Duplex's eyes widened, blinking slowly. "Are you refusing me? I have claimed this space. It is now ours." "Look," Jackson said, holding his hands up in a defensive posture. "I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm not into whatever this is. No offense, but I don't really do, alien bonding rituals." The alien stared at him, and for a moment, Jackson wasn't sure if she was offended or just confused by the entire concept. "I do not understand," Duplex said after a long pause, stepping closer. "You humans do not partake in our mating season?" "Mating season?" Jackson exclaimed, stepping back. Whoa. No. I am definitely not participating in whatever this is." Her head tilted even further, and she examined him as if his entire life was a puzzle she had to piece together. "But we must bond. You are chosen." "I'm chosen for what?" Jackson sputtered, now visibly panicking. This was bad. Really bad. He didn't know how to handle an alien claiming him. "It is tradition," Duplex said with an odd serenity. "It is the way of my people. I claim you now." "Hold on." Jackson started to protest, but it was already too late. She stepped forward, her glowing hands reaching toward him like she was about to mark him in some way. Desperately, Jackson scrambled for any kind of solution. "Wait. What if we just, I don't know, talk about this before, marking me as whatever?" But Duplex didn't hear him. She was already preparing for what she thought was her next step. This was only the beginning of a very, very awkward situation. Jackson stood frozen, eyes wide, heart pounding as Duplex's hands reached for him. His brain was spinning. How in the world had this happened? One moment, he was living a perfectly average life, and now he was being claimed by an alien. In his own hallway. There was no way this was real. No! Jackson managed to get out, taking a quick step back. "Listen, you can't just claim me. I don't know what kind of bonding ritual you've got going on, but I'm not participating." Duplex seemed unfazed by his protest. "You misunderstand," she said calmly, her antennae twitching slightly. "This is the custom of my people. We claim what is ours during mating season." "Mating season?" Jackson felt a mix of disbelief and horror. "Oh, come on, you're telling me you can't just go through a mating season without picking someone?" He waved his arms around, trying to back away, but Duplex was already stepping closer. "I am not picking," she replied, her voice measured and serious. "You are compatible." Jackson's mind raced, trying to make sense of this. "Compatible? Compatible for what?" "Look, I don't know how things work on your planet, but where I come from, we have this thing called consent. You can't just pick someone and claim them like you own them." Duplex paused, blinking those huge eyes at him. "Consent?" she repeated, as though the word itself was a new concept to her. "This is unfamiliar to me." "Yeah, I figured," Jackson muttered under his breath. All right, look, we're gonna need to have a little chat about boundaries, okay? I'm not trying to be rude here, but I need you to back off." He stepped back again, his mind still reeling from the strange turn of events. "I do not wish to be rude either," Duplex said, her voice low and even. "But I have marked the space. This is the ritual." Jackson raked his fingers through his hair. This was a nightmare. What had started as a friendly, if awkward, interaction with a strange neighbor had escalated into something out of a bizarre sci-fi flick. And he was in the middle of it. He had to think fast, or things were going to get much worse. "Okay," Jackson said, his tone shifting to one of determination. "Listen, I get it. You're from a different planet, and things work differently here, but there's one thing that's universal." He paused for effect, staring directly into her huge eyes. "Consent. That's how we do things on Earth. You can't just claim people like you're picking out a new rug." Lutrax tilted her head as if pondering his words. "Consent," she repeated, testing the sound. "This is a ritual? Like a formal agreement?" Jackson sighed, trying to simplify it. "Yes. Exactly. You ask, and the person gets a say in it. It's not complicated. You can't just go around marking people without asking if they're okay with it." He rubbed his temples. "Look, I don't want to offend you or anything. But you're freaking me out." For a moment, there was silence. Then Lutrax said something that caught Jackson off guard. "Is this how your species handles mating?" Jackson stared at her, blinking. "What? No. That's not even, no," he stammered, his voice rising in disbelief. I'm not saying that. I just don't want to be marked by a stranger." Lutrax paused again, clearly processing the exchange, before stepping back a fraction. "I see. You are uncomfortable with the marking." "Yeah," Jackson said, his heart still racing. "To put it mildly, yes. I'm extremely uncomfortable." There was a long pause before Lutrax spoke again, her voice softer this time. "I did not mean to make you uncomfortable." Jackson let out a breath of relief. "Well, that's a first step, I guess." The alien stood still for a moment, her massive eyes studying him with an intensity that was almost human. It was then that Jackson realized something. Despite the overwhelming weirdness of it all, Lutrax wasn't trying to harm him. She was just lost. She didn't understand the concept of personal space or consent. Hell, she didn't even seem to understand why Jackson was so disturbed by the whole situation. It wasn't malicious. It was just culture shock on a cosmic scale. "So if I say no," Jackson said, taking a tentative step forward, "then you stop? Just like that?" Lutrax gave a quick nod. "Yes. I will stop. But it is unusual. My people do not operate in such a way." "Yeah, well," Jackson muttered, "we're not all the same, are we?" "You are different," she said, almost thoughtfully. "And yet we are similar." Jackson stared at her for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. This was all so bizarre, and yet there was something oddly fascinating about it. He couldn't help but feel like there was an opportunity here, some way to turn this situation to his advantage. He'd seen enough of alien movies to know how this kind of thing usually went. But this was different. "You know what?" Jackson said, shaking his head. Let's slow this down. No claims, no rituals. How about we just have a normal conversation like two normal people? How's that sound?" Lutrax blinked again, this time more slowly, and then she gave him a nod. "Conversation. Yes, I can do that." Jackson exhaled in relief. He had somehow managed to talk his way out of this, and while he wasn't sure how long it would last, he had at least gotten through the worst of it. But Lutrax wasn't done yet. "May I ask," she began, her voice almost cautious, "how your species handles companionship? Is it something like what we experience during mating season? Is it like this?" She gestured vaguely at the glowing symbols on the hallway walls, and Jackson had to suppress a groan. "No," he said flatly. "Definitely not. It's nothing like that. We don't mark people. We don't, Jesus, how do I even explain this?" Lutrax was still focused on him, her intense gaze fixed on every word. "You humans are strange. And yet you seem to manage your rituals better than we do." Jackson chuckled, rubbing his forehead. "Yeah, well, that's because we have this thing called boundaries. You should try it sometime. It's great." He paused for a second. But listen, you don't have to understand everything. The point is, I'm not interested in being claimed. And I'd really like it if you stopped with the glowing symbols outside my door, okay? Lutrax nodded, this time with more conviction. Understood. No more glowing. Well, thank you, Jackson said, feeling a little relieved. You're a lot more reasonable than I thought. I am learning, she replied simply. Jackson looked at her for a moment longer, still half in disbelief at how this whole conversation had played out. All right, Lutrax. Maybe we can work this out. But let's take it one step at a time, okay? No more claiming people, no more rituals, just neighbors. Got it? The alien tilted her head again, as if weighing the idea. Then, much to Jackson's surprise, she gave a small, thoughtful smile. Agreed. Neighbors. I will respect your boundaries. Jackson couldn't help but laugh a little. Thank you. That's all I'm asking for. Now, how about some pizza? You know, to seal the deal? Lutrax raised an eyebrow. Pizza? That is the bonding food? Yeah, sure, Jackson said, laughing. You could say that. Just, no glowing symbols this time, okay? Lutrax nodded, her eyes gleaming. Agreed. I shall try pizza. The following day, Jackson found himself standing in front of a pizza box, feeling a bit like a kindergarten teacher trying to explain the basics of human civilization to a space-faring alien. Lutrax stood beside him, towering and strangely attentive, her massive eyes scanning the pizza box with what could only be described as mild confusion. So, Jackson said, wiping his hands on his pants. This is pizza. You get it from a place called a pizzeria, which is basically a place that specializes in cheese, bread, and toppings. It's the food of the people, or at least most of us. He flashed a quick grin, hoping this whole thing wouldn't end with Lutrax trying to analyze the pizza with some alien scientific device. Lutrax didn't respond immediately, instead carefully examining the box like it might contain some kind of secret message. Cheese. Bread. And toppings? She repeated, as though the combination itself was the most complex formula she'd ever encountered. Yeah, pretty much, Jackson said, moving to open the box. He wasn't sure what kind of alien etiquette applied in this situation, but it felt odd to be talking about pizza as if it were an artifact to be studied. Let me show you how it works. He pulled a slice out, offering it to her. You pick up a slice, eat it with your hands, and that's it. Pretty straightforward. Lutrax looked at the pizza slice in his hand, her antennae twitching slightly, as though trying to analyze it from multiple angles. And you do not use utensils? She asked, sounding genuinely baffled. Nope, Jackson said, laughing. No utensils. It's all about the hands. It's messy, but it's part of the charm. He bit into his own slice and chewed. It tasted just as good as he remembered, comforting in its simplicity. Look, you'll get the hang of it. It's just food, nothing complicated. It's a basic human experience. She mimicked his actions, though far more slowly, taking the slice into her hand with an awkward grasp. Jackson watched, half amused, half anxious. This was a bit surreal. She seemed to be trying to understand every little detail about the process, analyzing it as though it was some sort of ancient rite. After a few moments of silence, Lutrax took a tentative bite. She chewed, blinked, and then, unexpectedly, stared at him with wide eyes. This is extraordinary. Yeah, right? Jackson chuckled. Pizza has that effect on people. Lutrax chewed again, more slowly this time, her focus entirely on the slice. This is the food of your people, she said, as though she had uncovered a great mystery. And it is good. She gave Jackson a serious look. Perhaps there is much more to humanity than I initially believed. Jackson grinned, leaning back. We've got a whole food culture you'd never believe. But don't go getting any ideas about claiming pizza, all right? There's plenty to go around. He raised an eyebrow, half joking but half serious. Lutrax paused mid-bite, eyeing him curiously. You jest. I understand the concept of sharing. She tilted her head slightly. It is common among your people? Yeah, Jackson said, laughing. Sharing is definitely a thing. Though I'm pretty sure the real test will come when we get to the last slice. He took another bite of his pizza and watched as she continued to devour hers with an almost alien intensity. This wasn't exactly the kind of first bonding experience Jackson had expected, but it was kind of working. In some strange way, this bizarre alien encounter had shifted from total disaster to something more manageable. Duplex didn't seem malicious, just, well, deeply other. And that was okay. He was learning to navigate this situation. The silence between them stretched on for a while, with both of them focused on their pizza. Jackson, ever the master of awkwardness, was the one to break the silence. So, what's it like? Your mating season, I mean, he said, wincing a little as the words left his mouth. I mean, we already established that you're trying to claim me and all. How does that actually work for you? Duplex paused, her eyes narrowing slightly as she considered his question. Mating season is a time when my people must bond. We are drawn to certain individuals, compelled to form connections. This is our way of ensuring the continuation of our species. Sounds intense, Jackson muttered, shaking his head. He felt a slight twinge of sympathy for the poor alien. So, this whole claiming thing? It's not just about pizza, is it? No, she said, her voice uncomfortably serious. It is much more than food. It is about connection, energy, and survival. Our bond ensures we are compatible for mating and future offspring. Great, Jackson muttered under his breath. Well, that's one way to go about it. He swallowed his last bite of pizza, a little too fast, and tried to think about what he had just heard. The whole situation felt like a bizarre game of intergalactic cultural exchange, except one side wasn't entirely aware that it was playing by different rules. So wait, Jackson said, his thoughts catching up. If you're compelled to form connections during your mating season, does that mean you can't just turn it off? You're, like, always looking for someone to bond with. Duplex blinked. Not quite. The compulsion is strongest during mating season, but the urge remains dormant during other times. But once we are in season, it is unavoidable. Our bodies are designed to seek compatibility. That sounds kind of exhausting, Jackson said, trying to wrap his mind around it. I mean, you're basically on autopilot for bonding, right? No room to back out, no. Time to think about what you actually want. Her eyes narrowed slightly as if she was considering his words for the first time. It is a biological imperative. But I do not think I am unhappy with this cycle. I just find it difficult to adjust to your customs. They are unfamiliar. Jackson nodded, grateful for the honest conversation. Yeah, I get that. It's gotta be confusing. Different planets, different ways of doing things. Duplex was silent for a moment, staring at the empty pizza box between them. I believe I must learn to respect your boundaries, Jackson. If I am to live among your kind, I must adapt. That's all I'm asking, Jackson said, relieved. He leaned back, looking at her seriously. And look, if you ever feel like you're really stuck in your mating season again, just talk to me. I'll help. I'm not gonna, bail on you just because things got weird. Thank you, she said, her voice soft. I am still learning. Jackson smiled, though he couldn't shake the feeling that this whole thing could spiral into something else if he wasn't careful. He wasn't sure what to expect next, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't let his alien neighbor get any more attached. He wasn't ready for that, and frankly, he wasn't sure if he'd ever be. He liked the idea of helping her, of guiding her through human boundaries, but there was a limit. A hard limit. He had to set it now before things got completely out of hand. Well, I think you've had enough of the human bonding rituals for today, Jackson said with a grin. But hey, you're welcome to come by any time. Just remember to knock next time, okay? Duplex nodded, that strange, alien smile returning. Understood. I will respect your boundaries. Good, Jackson said, his tone lighter now. Now let's just try to survive this mating season together without any more weird claims, okay? Agreed. The following weeks passed in a strange kind of balance, one Jackson never could have predicted. Life in his duplex, which had once felt like a quiet, ordinary existence, now felt like the setting of a bizarre sci-fi sitcom. He had somehow become the reluctant mentor to an alien who was learning the ways of human interaction through pizza, awkward conversations, and the peculiar concept of boundaries. Duplex was, surprisingly, a quick learner. She'd stopped marking his door with glowing symbols, at least after the first few tries, and had started to grasp some basic concepts of human interaction. At least, that's what Jackson liked to think. There were still moments, though, where her alien nature would pop up in ways that made him question everything. He was standing at the kitchen counter one evening, chopping vegetables for dinner when Duplex appeared in the doorway, her towering form casting a long shadow. Jackson glanced up, his knife pausing mid-chop. "I have learned," she said, her voice serious as always, "that your people value privacy, but not in the way my people do. You do not mark spaces as territories, but you expect them to be respected?" "Yeah," Jackson replied, trying to keep his voice casual. "That's about the gist of it. Personal space, boundaries, that kind of thing. It's not complicated, really." Duplex's antennae twitched slightly, as if she was processing the new information. "You do not claim your territory, then?" she asked. "You do not, Mark?" "No," Jackson said, grinning. "Humans don't usually go for the whole marking thing. We have locks on our doors, and that works fine for us." Duplex looked at him thoughtfully. "Interesting. I will try to respect your lock system," she said, as if the concept was still a bit foreign. Jackson gave her a nod, relieved that she was at least starting to grasp some basic concepts. But there were times, he had to admit, when it felt like she was living in her own little world. The line between her alien customs and his human reality was constantly blurring. "Hey, Duplex," Jackson said, deciding it was time to try something a little more challenging. "You've been hanging around here a lot, and you've learned a lot about how we do things. But I think it's time you learned a bit more about, human emotions." The alien blinked at him, her enormous eyes widening in curiosity. "Emotions?" she asked, her voice quiet, but with an unmistakable edge of interest. "I know anger. And I know happiness." Jackson sighed, realizing that maybe he'd overestimated how much she understood. "All right, let's start with something basic. I'm talking about how people get attached. When someone gets close to you, maybe in a way that's more than just neighbors," he explained. "It's not just about food or survival, it's about connection." Duplex seemed to process this for a moment. "Attachment. Yes. I understand. We form bonds for the sake of survival." Her voice was so matter-of-fact it made Jackson's brain do a double-take. "Okay, sure, but that's not the whole picture," Jackson said, chuckling. "Humans form emotional bonds for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes it's because we care about each other, sometimes because we feel a need to share things, sometimes it's, romantic, I guess. There's a whole spectrum." Duplex tilted her head, clearly intrigued. "Romantic?" she asked, as though testing the word. "Like the bonding you spoke of before? A deeper connection?" "Exactly," Jackson said, finding himself a little surprised by how much he was getting into this conversation. "Romance isn't just about physical attraction or bonding, it's about sharing experiences and emotions with someone. A lot of it is psychological." She seemed deep in thought for a moment, her antennae flicking with curiosity. "And this romance, is it necessary for your species?" "Necessary?" Jackson said, laughing slightly. "Well, not necessary in the survival sense, I guess. But most people like the idea of sharing their life with someone. It's kind of what makes life interesting, It's the emotional connection. It's about wanting to be around someone." Duplex stared at him, clearly absorbing his words, though she was clearly struggling to fully grasp the nuances. She shifted on her feet, her eyes thoughtful. "So, if I wanted to form such a connection," she began carefully, "I would not need to claim a person. It is not a ritual?" Jackson blinked. Wait, hold on. Are you asking if you can date someone the human way? He stared at her, feeling a mix of confusion and amusement. I mean, I didn't think you were ready for that conversation yet. I am ready, she said matter-of-factly. I am learning. And I believe I could understand it. It is just another way of forming a bond, yes? Jackson laughed nervously, running his fingers through his hair. Yeah, sure. That's one way to put it. But, I'm not really sure you're ready for, the whole dating thing just yet. Maybe let's focus on not claiming people in the meantime. Lutrax's eyes glinted with amusement, and Jackson could almost swear he saw a smile tug at the corners of her mouth. I will respect your boundaries, she said, sounding almost too sincere for comfort. Thanks, I appreciate that, Jackson said, still not quite sure what to make of this new development. But hey, just remember, humans need time to build connections. And when we do, it's slow. It's not about rushing in. It's about understanding each other. Lutrax seemed to consider this, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Slow, she echoed. I see. It felt like they were making some progress, but the thought of Lutrax applying alien logic to something like romance still made Jackson a little uneasy. He wasn't sure where this was headed, but at least he wasn't getting claimed by his alien neighbor anymore. Still, the thought of trying to explain the intricacies of human relationships to a species that had never even heard of consent before had Jackson wondering just how far this whole boundary thing would actually go. He shook his head, trying to push the thought out of his mind. At least for now, things were calm. That was all he could really hope for. So, how about we just skip the romance talk for today? Jackson suggested, trying to steer the conversation away from anything too intense. Maybe let's just watch a movie. Human bonding experience, right? Lutrax's antennae twitched in curiosity. A movie? Is it similar to our rituals? Jackson grinned. Sort of. But with popcorn. Popcorn? She repeated, her voice laced with that same cautious curiosity. Yeah, Jackson said, grabbing a bag of the snack. You'll love it. Trust me. Lutrax didn't say anything, but there was a definite gleam in her eyes as she followed Jackson to the couch. Even if the alien connection was a bit more than he was prepared for, he was starting to think that maybe he could teach her a thing or two about humanity. One awkward, pizza-filled step at a time. And maybe, just maybe, they'd get through this whole thing without things getting too complicated.